Hey, it's Nathas, Forge Guardian and 2023 SolForge World Champion, and you're listening to the Soulbind Podcast.
You're listening to Soulbind, a new podcast about the people who play the hybrid card game SolForge Fusion and their relationship with this game. I love this game, and I'm curious to find out what others love about it too. How they were first introduced, how the game has changed for them over time, and what their hopes and dreams are for the future of the world of Solus. Hey everybody, so my name is Bryce, my Discord handle is IronBrice, and you are listening to a brand new podcast called Soulbind. So I have my first guest with me here today. I'm very excited. Welcome, Nathas. Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited too.
Really, the impetus for doing a show like this is that there are already two SolForge Fusion podcasts out there. So I was trying to think what I can do a bit differently from everybody else. And in general, I'm quite interested in people, what they're into, why they like something, why they don't like something. And so really, this is just a deep dive into why people like this game. What are the different things that bind them to it, the different things that maybe turn them off a little bit or that they love the most about it. And we're just going to sort of do a deep dive into the different corners of this game. I think there's a lot to like about it, and I'm just curious to explore that with different people. So I've played a lot of different games. I was a board game kid and then sort of went cold on it and then moved to Australia in my 20s, wanted to make some new friends, found some awesome board game communities all over the place. Started playing some games competitively. Star Wars Imperial Assault was a big one. Traveled around Australia playing that, and that was really fun. A lot of fond memories from that. Played Star Wars Destiny, traveled around for that as well. Keyforge, really big into that until it fell apart. And I'm a big fan of lifestyle games in general, the kind of games where it sort of consumes your every waking thought. You're going to bed thinking about pairings. You're waking up, you're thinking about pairings. You've got buddies that you can be messaging through the day, and you're on Discord chatting, oh, have you thought about this, thought about that? And that's what sort of led me to create SolForge and sort of try and build a community here in Australia, but also connect with players like yourself, Nathas, around the world. So can you tell me a little about yourself? What got you into SolForge? And maybe before that, what's your history with gaming in general?
Yeah, so I would say that I've been playing games since I was really, really young. So my earliest memories of gaming is actually, I think I was in elementary school, and then me and my little brother, we collected Pokemon cards and Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And every weekend, my parents would drop me off at like one of the local stores, and I would enter Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments. Didn't really know the rules. It was like right when the game had come out, but I would go play. And like every once in a while I'd win a game, and then when my parents came to pick me up, the people at the tournament were like, oh wow, your son's real good. And like it was just one of those things where I've always been attracted to card games and like hobbies like that. So growing up, I played that. I like in college, I got really into Magic. So I played almost every day after class. Like it was a really competitive area because I went to school near Albany, the capital region in upstate New York, and there was a lot of Pro Tour players in that area. I played a lot of like PTQs, things like that, and I just really enjoyed playing competitive card games. And once I graduated college, I found myself kind of playing a little bit of Magic here and there, but I got a little bit more focused on work and life and things like that. But I would say I really got back into card gaming when I started playing Flesh and Blood. I would say probably around like right after kind of the lockdowns ended during the pandemic. My buddies got me back in because I hadn't really played Magic for a couple years at that point. Got really into Flesh and Blood and was playing that like every week. Just got really excited about card games again. And then one of my buddies, Brandon, was like, I have this game I think you're really going to like. It's called SolForge. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. So it was like right before the game had come out, like one of the stores locally supported the Kickstarter and had a bunch of Kickstarter products. So he got a couple starters and was like, this seems right up your alley. I think you're going to love this. So we played a couple games. I'm like, this is pretty good. So I went to that store and I bought a couple like Kickstarter booster kits just so I could get some cards. Played some games with him. I'm like, oh, this is a lot of fun. Went back to that store, bought some more Kickstarter booster kits, and then it kind of spiraled from there to the point where I was just like hooked. And basically, I've been playing SolForge ever since. So it's been like I've always loved card games. I've always really enjoyed kind of just that strategy aspect of card gaming versus just playing like normal video games. And I think SolForge just kind of really scratched an itch that a lot of other games didn't. So yeah, here I am now.
What do you think it is about card games? Because I'm kind of the same. For some reason, that is always the engine that drives me the most. And, you know, there's nothing that tactile about it. I mean, there is a card, you put it down on the table or not in the case of the digital. But what do you think it is about card games that particularly attracts you?
So for me, I would say that for the longest time, I would always put myself as a collector before a player. So like in Magic, even though I played competitively, I always cared about collecting like all the shiny cards, like the max rarities in terms of like foil decks, things like that. And I've always just really enjoyed having a collection. Just like since I was little, I always enjoyed like, I guess like money, things like that. And I was always like, oh, I could get these cards and they might be worth more money than when I initially got them. So like just that collectability is something that I always enjoyed. And then for games like Magic and Flesh and Blood, I would always enjoy like trading cards at their peak for cards that were at a low value, then see those cards increase in value. So I think that aspect of card gaming always just really brought me in from the sake of just like, okay, I could actually like, granted, I never sell my cards. I was like, oh yeah, I could make money here, but I always collect and I hoard. And my girlfriend's like, oh, you're a hoarder, you're a dragon. You always buy all these things and you never actually sell them, even though you say you will. You say your collection's worth X amount of dollars, but I don't see you selling. So is it really worth any money? And I'm just like, yeah, but I love it. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think love is a big part of it for me as well. I was a massive collector of Keyforge decks, and I did manage to sell one for a decent price, but then I just went and bought a whole bunch more products with the sale. So it can be that perpetuating thing. And what do you think, you know, I'm jumping around my show notes, but what do you think led you to get such a big collection? What was it? Was it each time you opened a box, what was that feeling? Because I get that as well. This with the modifiers for me and all the different combinations of cards. I think some games I stop buying when I've just either, if it's a collectible game like Destiny, I've got my portfolio filled and I've got all the copies of everything, so I stop at that point. But this game feels like you can go a bit wider just because there is always a different combination every open.
Yeah, so I guess if you're asking specifically, so for a lot of games, I guess the collections has just been like different reasons for it. But specifically for SolForge, the reason why I went so deep is I started playing the game and I really enjoyed the fact that like it's a different constraint to deck building than a lot of other games. So like something like Magic or Flesh and Blood, you get your collection of cards, you really need a play set of everything, and then you go to build your deck. And you can net deck and you kind of know the best cards in the format, the best decks in the format. So with SolForge, the fact that it was very much you had your algorithmically generated deck, it's completely unique, and you have to basically fuse it with something else. Like that alone makes deck building simpler, but also a little bit more, I guess, elegant is the word I'd like to call it, because it's like, hey, you have a very simple choice. It's A and B. You put them together, but that B deck that you pick to go with your other deck, like that decision could drastically impact the playability of the cards in that list. So as I kind of was fusing new cards, fusing new decks, and I was just like, wow, like I kind of wonder, like I saw someone else had a really cool card. Like one of my local players pretty early on opened a Shambling Shambler, and I'm like, I want one of those. So then I was just like buying more packs to try to get some of those chase cards. But then as I was getting more and more decks, I saw there was more and more cool modifiers and cool cards. And it got to the point where I was chasing some of those really high rolled, like top of the line decks where you have like 9 to 10 perfect cards together that could then really push you for competitive play. So I think it's just the fact that every deck is unique is something that really drew me, because of the fact that it's like no one could have this exact deck that I have. And the fact that it's just like I need to have the challenge of trying to find a pair for this. The best way to do it is to have a very large pool of cards. So I kind of think that over time, I just kept getting more collections, getting more packs, and it just spiraled out of control. But I love it, and I think it was worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the joy that it brings you, and it must be so fun with where you're sitting right now, because any given day you can wake up and go, I think I want to try this, and you've got 10 different ways you can assemble that together, right? Whereas most of us might have just one kindred bear that we have to work with, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It definitely helps with deck building when it's like, oh, I have this cool idea I want to do. And it's like I have already, because I right now, for people who don't know me, I have, I think, close to like 3,200 half decks in my collection. So I basically, as far as I know, I think me and Namrog are probably the two largest collections out there that are not like stores. And I know Grey Viking Games, they have a very large collection that they sell from as well. But I don't know if there's anyone who has more than me at the moment. But it's something that like it definitely helps the more decks you have to be able to get some cooler pairings and just be able to be like, you know what, today I want to play Spellslinger. Let me just go find something. And it's like it's just very easy to find your pair for that. And like when you have that many decks to be able to pull from.
And I love that about it, that, you know, you don't seem to me as somebody who's just opening packs to get the one most busted thing you can get so you can play that, but it's more like a variety of different play experiences you're trying to get out of the game. That's what it kind of feels like to me.
Exactly.
Do you remember, like, let's go back a little bit. You know, I'm always a fan of movies that go back and forward in time, so why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning. Can you remember those first few games and when this game really clicked for you? Like, because obviously you were into Flesh and Blood. You were obviously interested enough to give it a try, but did you know then, you know, what was the moment where you knew this was going to be a big thing for you?
I think for me, so obviously I tried the demo game with my buddy Brandon and I was like, wow, this is fun. Like, because just at face value, I was like, I played Jumpstart for Magic. So I understood the idea of taking two decks, putting them together. And I've never really done anything that was like specifically lane-based combat. So I was like, that's pretty cool. And I actually was very interested in the fact that there was not necessarily a resource system, but instead you just have your actions and you're trying to push your free items. So I'm like, there's enough about this game that was unique and seemed interesting for me to give it a try. And then plus, like, Brandon's the one who got me into Flesh and Blood. He's gotten me into a lot of other games. So typically when he's like, you will probably like this game, he's usually right. Like, he also got me, like, locally, he was one of the people who helped push me in the Star Wars Unlimited as well, which is another game that I've been playing. So I think that it's just him recommending this game to me was enough for me to give it a try. And then when I'm like, okay, this is a lot more than face value in terms of like your sequencing and the fact that when you're leveling a card, it actually matters for later in the game. So like I remember like seeing my first Krogius thinking, oh, it's a 1/1, it's garbage, not even looking at the level 3 until somebody played it against me and I'm like, okay, this is a good card. Maybe I need to start actually looking at the other levels of cards and trying to plan how to like get these cards out later in the game. And I think the time when I went back to the store for the third time to go get more stuff was when I was like, I think I'm hooked. Because like I had bought I think I bought 2 boosters the first time, went back and I got like 2 more, and then the second, like, so I basically had a full display at that point, and then the third time I went back, I think I got like 4 more, and then I bought like one of the dice kits, and I bought all this other stuff, and I was just like, all right, like this game has got me enough where I'm like still wanting to buy these because like I remember like I opened like a cool Betrayer, like Scorchmane Dragon and Aloyan #1, and I think that was like my first Betrayer at a Kickstarter that I like remember. And I like saw that, and then everyone like who was like in that small group who was playing initially got really excited, and they're like, oh my god, it's a #1 and it's one of the cool cards. So I'm like, oh, I want more cool cards, I want more Betrayers, and it just kind of spiraled. But I do think it was just those first few games I really recognized that the mechanics of the game were very sound. And then it was just the like once I went back, like I said, that like probably that third time, I was like, all right, I'm hooked. I'm gonna probably be playing this for a while.
Yeah, I actually had quite a similar story in the sense that like me and a few buddies, we'd heard about the game, we'd heard Covenant discussing the game on some of their podcasts and things like that. And at the time we were getting to the game, which was December 2023, the product had already had like a really weird history in Australia where apparently there had been this first wave of a couple of players who'd gotten really into it and were sort of competing with some of you over in America for size of collection, and they all sold out and the game had sort of fallen over here, and we just picked it up at kind of bargain bin prices, like $3 or something like that for a booster kit. So we're like, oh, we'll give this game a go. Sounds interesting. And man, like 1 order turned into 2 orders, turned into 5 orders, turned into 10 orders, and it's just been sprinting ever since because, we're in a really nice position here in Australia to get cheap product, and man, it's fun to just open box after box after box and not break the bank, just to hook those new players. So we found that's really good for getting new people to give it a go because, for $5, give it a try. Yeah.
Exactly. I know exactly how you're feeling. So that's awesome. And I'm really just like, as an aside, I really appreciate what you guys have been doing there. Just from watching from overseas, like it's nice to see your community flourishing and that you guys are really getting into the game, because I feel like I'm watching like my experience getting into the game over again as watching your community grow, and it's just really exciting to see. So
that's awesome.
It's been really cool.
Yeah, thanks. And the other point I wanted to pick up on that you mentioned was it's interesting hearing your origin story for loving upgrades. Having heard you on lots of different podcasts talk about what your experience was in the first season leading up to Worlds, the deck that you played at Worlds, which was very upgrade synergy focused with your corrupt drone and other bits and pieces. So it is kind of nice hearing that first moment where you're like, upgrades are good, and then see how that takes you on a journey.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Is there any more you wanted to elaborate on your journey with upgrades, and when did you really start to lean into that or know that that was going to be your path for Worlds?